We are now on 14 Amud Bet, that Yudal and Amud Bet, or if you're following an article 14b2. And the Gemara now, where we're cutting in, is in the middle of a question that we've been dealing with. And that question is, we read about the fact that there's Huldah HaNeviah, she is a prophetess at the time, and what we're saying about Huldah specifically is that she was giving her prophecy during the time of Yirmiyah. And the Gemara's question was, why was she giving the prophecy during the time of Yirmiyah? The Gemara's answer is, she was family, and therefore Yirmiyah did not mind. Although in some people's families, that's specifically when they mind. But either way, let's carry on. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Yirmiyah lo hava hatam. Yirmiyah, at that point, he was not there. He was not in Yerushalayim anymore. Because he left in order to go bring back the 10 tribes. What does that mean, to go bring back the 10 tribes? Just to be, I'll give you a little bit of history lesson. The king of Am Yisrael was always supposed to be from Shevet Yehuda. Okay? It goes from Shaul to David, and that's really where it's supposed to carry on. And assuming everything would have been done correctly, all the kings of all of Am Yisrael would have come from Yehuda. Unfortunately, there's a mistake that gets made, and because of that, the kingdom is split, and it again gets taken back from the kings from the tribe and the lineage of David, and kings are appointed from Am Yisrael over Am Yisrael, and 10 of the tribes split from Yehuda and Binyamin that are together. Okay, those two tribes are together, and what's it called? And the rest of the 10 tribes are by themselves being ruled by another ruler. Now that could have been another ruler who was ruling the Jewish people according to the rules of the Torah. But as we already explained in the end of Masechet Ta'anit, right? At some point, he decided, you know something, this is not good for me, it's not working out for me. I'm going to play second fiddle if the Jews go up to the Beit HaMikdash. Only the king from the tribe of David HaMelech is able, from the family of David HaMelech, and the tribe of Yehuda is able to sit in the Azara when they're reading the Torah in the Beit HaMikdash. So it will be obvious that I'm second fiddle, I'm second class. So what did Yeravam ben Nevat? He set up Avodah Zarah stations at every fork in the road. And the Jewish people were unable, or were not going up into Eretz Israel to Yerushalayim to be able to go to the Beit HaMikdash, and they were turned to Avodah Zarah. That's what happened in the story of Yeravam ben Nevat. Okay, so the 10 tribes are separate. At some point, the 10 tribes are also exiled before the final exile of the Jewish people. Okay, this is not talking about Sambatyon. This is none of that. They're exiled for a period of time from Eretz Israel before the rest of the last 2 tribes are exiled. So the Gemara says, before that exile was complete, Yirmiyahu, who lived at that time, the time of the desolation, he went to go get the 10 tribes and bring them back to Eretz Israel. Umilalan da'ahadur. How do we know that he brought the 10 tribes back? The Gemara says, the seller will not return to that which is sold. What's he talking about? We know that during the Yovel time, a field would go back to its original owner, or a slave would be freed at that time. So at that point, the mocher, the one that sold, would go back to that which was sold from him. They would be reunited. So ask the Gemara, Efshar Yovel batel v'navi mitnaveh alav shi batel? Is it possible that something Yovel was already batel, it was already decommissioned as a mechanism that brings the sale back, and the prophet is saying a prophecy about something that already was batel, already was annulled? What does that mean, it was already annulled? In order to have the law of Yovel bring a field back to its owner, or release a Hebrew slave, in order for that to happen, you had to have all of Am Yisrael living in Eretz Israel. So if the 10 tribes are not living in Eretz Israel, so then there is no law of Yovel. So he says, Ki hamocher el hamilkar lo yashuv. You know what's going to happen in the future? He's telling the future now, this prophet. You know what's going to happen? The seller is not going to return to the sale. Okay, that's already the case. It must be that if he says this prophecy, that the Yovel had returned to its efficacy, and now he was saying a prophecy that it would once again become null and void because they would be sent into exile. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Yirmiyah brought the 10 tribes back to Eretz Israel. Now, what's interesting to me is that actually, this really doesn't matter. Let's say Yirmiyah went to go get the 10 tribes and he failed and he never brought them back. Let's say we had no proof that he succeeded in his mission. It's not relevant to the Gemara's question. The Gemara's question was, why they asked Huldah? You know what the answer is? Because Yirmiyahu was not here. Who cares if that mission was a success? The reason why they asked Huldah was because Yirmiyahu was not here. What happened after Yirmiyahu wasn't here is not really relevant to the conversation in Gemara. But the Gemara is actually going out of its way to tell you that he actually did the mission. Okay? Now, Gemara continues. Yoshiyahu ben Amon malach alehem. Okay? So we know that Yoshiyahu, the son of Amon, he was ruling over all of Am Yisrael. This king that asked Huldah the question. Dechtiv. Vayomer, ma hatzion alaz, asher ani ro'eh, vayomer elav anshe ha'ir, hakever isha Elohim asher ba miYehuda. He asked, what is this Tzion? So it's interesting. Tzion, we always think of as Zion. But Tzion, when you say I'm going to visit the Tzion of the tzaddik, the Tzion means a monument. It means the kever. It means, but the monument and the kever, all those things, really, what are they? They mark that this is the place where this tzaddik is buried. That's what a Tzion is, okay? So Tzion is a marker that something is there. So the king asked, what is this marker, Asher ani ro'eh? This is the grave of the man of God, Asher ba miYehuda, vayikra et ha'devarim ha'eleh, asher asita al ha'mizbeach Beit El. This is the one of the prophet that came from Yehuda and said over all the things that you were going to do on the Mizbeach of Beit El. What does that mean? What does the king Yoshia have anything to do with this Mizbeach in Beit El? What's the relevance? What did he do? What does the pasuk mean that he did? It tells you that Yoshia, he ruled over even this other area, ruled over the 10 tribes and their area. And therefore, it tells about what he did when it came to the Mizbeach in Beit El. And there it tells us about what he did to the servants of the Avodah Zarah, that Yoshia basically brought to that Mizbeach and punished at that Mizbeach. Okay? Now, the Gemara over here tells us another proof now. We're going to move on again into this side angle of Yoshia, who's now in a certain way the defender of God and defending HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's taking the bones of all these people who served the idols in Beit El, and he's burning them on the Mizbeach, like on their Mizbeach, like, to illustrate, this is what of a fallacy this is. Now, the Gemara now continues talking about Rabbi Yoshia, which was only brought up in the first place to talk about Huldah being a prophetess. The Gemara says as follows. Rabbi Nachman says, we have another proof that Yoshia ruled over the 10 tribes that were not present in the beginning, that Yirmiyah went to get, which is why they asked Huldah instead of Yirmiyah. Gam Yehuda shat ketzir lach b'shuvi shivut ami. But also Yehuda shat ketzir, okay? Ketzir means when they bring in all of the harvest, all of the fruits, the vegetables, the wheat, whatever they're doing. B'shuvi shivut ami, when I return the captivity of the people. So the commentators explain that this is an expression of Yehuda. Ketzir means an element of strength. So the strength of Yehuda relates to the Shivut Ami, the bringing back of the exiles of my people. Who was that? That was the 10 tribes that were brought back. Machloket exactly how long before the end those 10 tribes were brought back. Either a short amount of time, less even than a Shemitah. The other opinion is 30-something years, 36 years, I think it was, or 37 years. And that was still less than a Yovel. But it might have been that during that time there was a Yovel, and that was what this the prophet had said a nivu'ah on, that again the Yovel will not work, because they'll be exiled, even though there was a period in which the Yovel did work. So when they were back, a Yovel year had to fall out in order for it to indicate that Yovel was back on, in which case it would then be again back off. The Gemara now continues to the next nivu'ah. Says the Gemara, Esther. How do we know Esther was a Malka? Dechtiv. Vahi b'yom hashlishi was on the third day. V'tilbash Esther malchut. What does this mean on the third day? Remember, she told the Jewish people, she said, Tzumu alai, gather everyone together. Let them fast for me for 3 days. No one should eat anything. Pray for me. That I will be able to find favor in the eyes of Achashverosh. Also, me and my maid servants, we will also fast, and maybe Hashem will grant us favor in the eyes of Achashverosh. On the third day, Vatilbash Esther Malchut. Esther, she dressed up in Malchut, in royal clothes. The Gemara asks, 1 second, if you meant that she dressed up in her royal clothes, what should it say? Bigdei Malchut. And it doesn't say Bigdei Malchut. It says Vatilbash Esther Malchut. Rather, it means that she became clothed Ruach HaKodesh, with a spirit, with the Holy Spirit. Ktiv hacha, it says over here, Vatilbash. Uchtiv hatam, and it says over there, Ruach Lavashat Amasai, and a spirit clothed Amasai. Now let's see this pasuk, because actually there's a strange pasuk to bring, because it doesn't actually relate to what we're talking about. Take a look over here. The pasuk says, it's number tet. You see it? Halfway in the wide lines at the bottom. V'ruach lavasha et Amasai rosh hashalishim lecha David ve'amecha ben Yishai shalom shalom lecha shalom leozecha ki yezerecha Elohim Elohecha v'yikablem David v'yitinem berosh hagedud. Over there, Amasai was coming to David HaMelech, and what was he? What was this spirit that he was clothed in? Right? What are we talking about over here? What is this? What's the dress of Amasai? Amasai was one of the fighters, okay, of the opposite. Yeah. So he comes to David and he has this ruach, this energy, this excitement, this desire to do something. So ruach over here does not relate to ruach hakodesh, but you see, listen carefully, that we use the words of lavisha to indicate ruach, because it says v'ruach lavisha et Amasai, right? So at this moment, I'm going to tell you, this moment, he was clothed with a spirit. Whether the spirit was a spirit of desire or the spirit was a spirit of ruach hakodesh is not relevant. When the pasuk tells us Vatilbash Esther, we see that she was clothed in a spirit, in a will, in something that was motivating her. It doesn't mean that she was clothed only in physical garments. And the proof is, it would have said Bigdei Malchut. Other places, by the way, in Megillat Esther, right? What does it say when Haman is dressing Mordechai in the clothing of Achashverosh? It doesn't just say, and he'll wear kingship. No. It says the clothing that the king will wear. So you see, if that's what it's talking about, it should have said it. Rather, it means that she was clothed with Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, so we see from there that Esther had prophecy. Now the question is, it's interesting, because in the other instances, either we are shown what the prophecy was, or we're shown specifically that, right, so they had a prophecy, or we're shown that they're called a nivuah, or it says that there was a nivuah, right? Over here, it's a little bit different. Over here, what we're reading about Esther, right, is that Esther was dressed with prophecy. Okay, well, what is that? What did that look like? What did that mean? We have no idea. Right? All we know is that we're making a derasha that she had prophecy. So it's a little bit strange to us to understand, what does this mean? Okay? So we'll come back to this at a later stage. One of the opinions is that the suggestion that she made must have been made with prophecy. The suggestion she made to institute this as a holiday. If you remember, we said 48 Nevi'im, 7 prophetesses, and they did not add one mitzvah, except for this, the mitzvah of Purim. Remember that? And if you remember earlier, Esther had to push the Chachamim to institute it as a holiday. If that did not come, or the Chachamim did not believe that came from Nevuah, they would not have gone through with it. But still, over here we're bringing the proof. Where does it mention in the pasuk? So we bring the pasuk where it mentions it. Let's continue. Amar Rav Nachman. Lo ya'eh yehiruta l'nasheh. Yehiruta can mean arrogance. Okay? Yehiruta. Like as an example, one of the halachot with regards to tefillah is that a person should not pray next to their rabbi, like equal to their rabbi. And what do we say over there? Mishum yuhara. What does yuhara mean? It looks like the guy is arrogant. He's equating himself to his rabbi. There's many halachot that we say mishum yuhara. So that root is yehiruta. So lo ya'e yehiruta lenashi. When a person is acting in that arrogant way, in that elevated status way, that's not something that's ya'eh. Ya'eh does not mean appropriate, right? Right? We say kala na'a, kala ya'a, right? What do we say? Ya'a. Ya'a means, does it fit that person? A woman is meant to be, to have this ability to nurture, to be able to build, not to be able to stand over and look down. Discipline oftentimes is supposed to be administered. That harshness is not coming from the feminine. Like we saw earlier, a woman, they went to Khulda because they knew that Nashim had more rahmanut than the men. So the Gemara over here is saying that Yehiruta is not appropriate. It's not supposed to be, it's not what a woman is designed to be able to carry or to carry herself. Tarti Nashi Yehiran Haviyan. We have two women who had this Yehirut, okay? They had this extra prominence or elevated status that were kind of looking down. Visanyan Shemayu. And the names that were given to them were names that were repulsive, were disgusting. Now, this is very, very interesting dotted line we're asked to walk on, and we'll kind of cover it in 1 second. Chada Shma Ziburta, one of them is a bee. V'chada Shma Karkushta, one of them is a weasel. Who are we referring to, of course? Devorah, which means a bee, and Chulda, which means a weasel. So you see that these prophetesses were given names that were disgusting to people. What was the reason? Not because they were disgusting. Not because they did something wrong. We're looking up to them for what they did. But a weasel is like rodent. It's a rodent. It's like a cross between a rat and a possum, maybe. Squirrel. Would be the best way I could describe it. Right?
Doesn't sound good.
It's not. No, it's not. It's not so nice. But the point is that we named these prophets. They had names, as you know. Also,
it was like an Indian, like to keep them.
What do you mean? To give them to keep them
from
Maybe that's a good explanation. What Avi is suggesting is that it was something that kind of reminded them every time they heard their names, that this was not what they were supposed to be.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Not don't get ahead of yourself in terms of keeping you in your place, but this is not your natural state, right? There's another thing as well, is that is this what women were meant to aspire to be? Like, so they looked at Chulda and Devorah, and is that what a woman said? That's what I want. As opposed to the fact that it was an outlying case, right? Where here they were coming to Chulda and having to ask, her to make, to call the shots, and as well with Devorah, the same thing. Is that something that we find, is something which is supposed to be taught to, held up for women to be able to learn from Devorah and Chulda. And maybe the pasuk is maybe the Gemara is telling us with the name that they were given that was a way of ensuring that was not what they did. Just one last piece. We find one example of this, a very tragic example in the Chashmonaim. So the Chashmonaim, we know, are the heroes of the story of Chanukah, right? And they are the sons of Matityahu Kohen Gadol, right? As we know, because we say in the Al Nisim, right? The sons of Matityahu Kohen Gadol, the 5 sons of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, etc. Right? So we read all about these great the sons of Matityahu, which one of them was Yochanan. And what's wild is that when you think about these people that saved the Jewish people, the Gemara tells us that there's not a single descendant left from Bet Chashmonai. Why? Because they did something as Kohanim that they needed to do, that they were supposed to do. They saved Am Yisrael, and it was magnificent. But then they took a situation which was not supposed to be that way. It was not their role. It was not what they were supposed to do. And even though in that moment they were needed and they should have done it, they then decided that they wanted to become the kings of Am Yisrael. And they grabbed the reins from Shevet Yehuda. And the Pasuk says, Lo Yasur Shevet Mi Yehuda. The kings are supposed to come only from the tribe of Yehuda. So what happened eventually? They were fulfilling a role that wasn't for them. A person's life force in this world is to be able to achieve the role that they come to this world to do. If you're doing someone else's role, there's no purpose for you anymore. And the entire Bet Hashmonai, which had turned to become the kings of Am Yisrael, was wiped off the face of the map. So I think one of the things over here also with regards to Chulda and Dvorah is that we wanted them to understand that this was not something, that was an ideal situation, and it meant that they needed to sometimes adopt mannerisms and approaches that were not not appropriate, not for them, not what was best, not what was best, not only what was best for us, but what was best for them and for their own personal mission in this world. I always thought to myself also, today Devorah is a relatively famous Jewish name. The Gemara over here calls it a name which is Sanyan, which is very interesting, right? Because that's because Chulda, you don't find many Chuldas running around.
As much. I've heard of it, but it's
not. You don't find many Chuldas running around. But Devorah is a very common name. You see over here, the Gemara is saying that it wasn't meant to be nice. Says the Gemara, where do you see Ziburta? Where do you see that this Devorah acted in a way which was Yehiruta? Because it says Vatishlach Vatikra leBarak, and she called, but she sent for and she called Barak. V'ihu ihi lo azla legabe. She would not go to him.
But Rabbi, didn't we bring that the reason when it says that she was sitting under the date tree and she was sewing the wicks? You said it was because she did it in a very respectful way to get her husband to go to the Beit Midrash. We were showing how great she was by the things she did for her husband.
So the pasuk is over here. The Gemara is saying over here that even though in the role, in the strategy, she did very, very well, but still when it came to sending for him and making him come before her, and it might mean that at a later stage, and this is to me what sticks out, is it says V'ihi lo azal legabe. She didn't go to him when he was a chashuv person. What do you mean she made him chashuv? And the answer is that that's true. But sometimes people's relationships change. And unfortunately, there are times when people are stuck in an old version of the relationship, and that indicates Yehiruta. So I'll give you an example of this. The pasuk says about Yaakov Avinu, and Yaakov spoke to his brothers. And Rashi says, what brothers? Only brothers Esav. And the Rashi says that his brothers meant his sons, who were to him like brothers. And Mefarshim say that once his sons fought alongside him in battle, they stopped being only his sons. And he stopped relating to them only as his sons. Because that relationship needs to evolve as they're no longer little kids. You have parents that relate to their grown kids still like they're 8 years old. And that's not appropriate anymore. It doesn't mean that they stop respecting you. It doesn't mean that Barak should have stopped respecting Devorah, right? But it also means that maybe Devorah should not have called for him like he was a page boy. Okay? So the Gemara is calling that Yehiruta. Okay? The Gemara continues. Karkushta, Ktivba, by Karkushta, by Chulda, it says, Imru la'ish, say to the man. When she was giving this advice to Yoshia, remember he asked her advice, she said, say to the man, V'lo amra imru la'melech, and she did not say to the kings. Now this is important. This is an important thing to be able to understand that even though you're the prophet. Natan Hanavi, Shmuel Hanavi, they still spoke to the kings with the eminence of the king. Now, I'm sure there are those that will try and explain that this was a adopted behavior, that maybe as women, they had to act this way to be able to get the respect, to have the people listen. You know, Osheken Oshelo, I don't know. But even if that was the case, I think what the Gemara is saying here is that still it required of them a changing of character and a changing of the nurturing self, which was their greatest gift. And I always think to myself, like, you know, how wild is it that they approach Huldah specifically because she's a woman? You understand that? Because they need from her as a prophetess, they need from her her feminine compassion. But she's responding and saying Imru La'ish with that Yehiruta, which is not Ya'eh. That's not what we needed from you.
It's like
You provided something that we don't have in a male prophet. We don't need you to be like a male prophet. Such amazing lessons for the time that we're living in, you know? All right, let's carry on. The Gemara continues. Amar Rav Nachman, Huldah mibnei banav shel Yehoshua aita. Huldah was from the great-grandchildren of Yehoshua. K'tiv hacha ben Charchas. It says by Huldah, it's referring to her lineage, and it says ben Charchas. This is very strange, this Gemara, okay? I want you to look at the pasuk, and you'll see in a minute why that's very, very strange. And it says also by Yirmiyah, by Yehoshua, that bitimnat cheres. So since in both times it says that language of cheres, it means that Huldah was the descendant of Yehoshua. Let's take a look at the pasuk for 1 second inside, and I want you to ask me the very obvious question. The pasuk says, Vatomer, number chaf, okay, is that where it is? No.
In the Torah, Vayelech Hilkiyahu, the Kohen.
Yes. Vayelech Hilkiyahu HaKohen, ve'achikam, ve'achbor, ve'shafan, ve'asaya el Huldah. By the way, I guess it was in vogue to name your children insane names. Achbor, Shafan, right? Shafan already, we have a president before. But Shafan is a rabbit. Achbor is a rat. Yeah, a mouse, whatever. So, okay. Anyway, all of them, they went El Chilkiah, El Huldah Neviah, Eshet Shalom ben Tikva, the wife of Shalom ben Tikva, ben Charchas, Shomer HaBegadim, Yoshev Yerushalayim, b'mishneh vayidabru elea. So, who's Ben Charchas? The husband's Ben Charchas. So then you find the pasuk that says Timnat Cheres, right? Where's that in the pasukim?
Vayikberu, like 4 lines from the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom.
Vayikberu oto begvul nachalato b'timnat Serach asher b'har Ephraim mitzvon lehar Gaash. Is that where it is?
Timnat.
So,
Timnat? 8?
No.
That's it?
I'm forgetting. But we have it all over the place. Okay? So either way, so Yehoshua was buried. Now look carefully. What does the pasuk say in Lamed?
Timnat Serach.
It doesn't even say Cheres.
I said Cheres in mine.
Sorry?
Mine says Cheres.
Ours says Serach.
Mine says Serach. We got to go to the mattresses. Okay, let's get a Yehoshua.
Shoftim?
Yehoshua, I think, no?
They're in the same book.
Not always. Yehoshua Chaf Dalet. Hi. Oops. both of the kids. Yehoshua Chaf Dalet. 24, Lamed.
Four.
Lamed.
Oh, Lamed.
One more. Oh no, you're right, you got it.
ויקברו אותו בגבול נחלתו בתמנת סרח. Well, interesting.
Yeah, but these are both art scroll. Hold on, it's a conspiracy.
Mine says
No, this is not.
Mine
I know.
Mine says Shoftim bet tet, and it says Cheres.
Maybe that's another pasuk.
It must be. This doesn't
No, not even close. No, I mean not that.
You said bet ches, right?
Bet tet.
Bet tet.
Okay.
what you should ויקברו אותו בגבול נחלתו בתמנת חרס.
Okay, so in Shoftim it says it.
One says Timnat Cheres, and one says
Timnat
Timnat
Serach.
Serach. And you're showing something.
Same letters. So what's it called? Maybe it was called both. Or maybe one person was dyslexic. Either way, point is, in one place it says Ben Charchas, and one place it says Ben Serach, okay, or Ben Cheres, right? In either scenario. But by the way, I wonder if that's really what it's saying. Because Cheres and Serach, that's kind of why it's called Ben Charchas, which is kind of like a mixture of both, right? Look at that, right? See what I'm saying? It's like a mixed up version of Cheres and Serach is Charchas. So maybe it's kind of quoting both. Either way, the point is that there's a link between Yehoshua and Huldah. Why? And now we asked the question, and Rashi actually says it explicitly. Rashi says, Ben Cherchas, v'afagav dekra al ba'ala kamasid, even though the pasuk is speaking about her husband, miu b'maaseh haketiv, it's talking about her actions. So if we're relating the lineage all the way back in the story of Huldah, Rashi is saying the Gemara's understanding that we would not have done so unless they were both from somehow relating back to that same family. So Timnat Cheres is the burial place of Yehoshua. Ben Charchas, which is a name that we don't find anywhere, must be relating to this place which is referred to alternatively as Serach or Cheres. And therefore, she is a ben of, she comes from the line of Yehoshua. Gemara says, hold up. Yeah?
He says here that since the two psukim contain a similar word, the Gemara infers that a connection exists between Yehoshua and Huldah from both psukim.
Right, so I'm suggesting that maybe the fact there's two psukim, and one says Ches and one says Serach, and then there's a Charchas, which is like just an admixture of all the letters, so maybe that's also what it's pointing out. Anyway, regardless, the Gemara carries on. Etbe, the Gemara asks a question. Rav Ena Saba le Rav Nachman. Rav Ena was the grandfather of Rav Nachman, or Rav Ena Saba, which means Rav Ena the Zaken, like the Saba Mikael or something. Shmona Nevi'im, Vehem Kohanim Yatzeu Merachav Azona. There were 8 different Nevi'im who also simultaneously were Kohanim, and they came from Rachav Azona. What does Rachav Azona mean?
Yeshua's wife.
So there are 2 interpretations for the word Zona, okay, on this. One interpretation means that Zona does not mean what it normally means. It just means someone that has, again, a Zona has people over. So a Zona, if that means also an innkeeper, has many different people over, okay? So it was a word that...
In yesterday's Haftarah.
Sorry? Yes, exactly. Okay? So the Gemara says, from this woman came 8 prophets that were also Kohanim. Elohim. Neriah, Baruch is the son of Neriah, Ushraya, Machseh, Yirmiyah. Machseh is not the city in France. Yirmiyah, Chilkiah, Chanamel, Vishalum. All of these people, Shalom we just read about, who was the husband of Huldah. Okay? Sorry?
Husband?
Yeah.
Shalom was husband of
Shalom was the husband of Huldah. Right? That was the
Is this all Yehoshua because Yehoshua marries Rachav?
Yes, ostensibly. There's a problem with that though, because we just said is Yoshua. We know that Yoshua married Rachav. So the Gemara is now saying they all came from Rachav. There's a little bit of an issue with that, and we'll see soon what the issue with that is. Okay? The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Af Chulda Nevi'ah, Mibnei Banea Sherachav Hazona Ita. Even Chulda also was from the grandchildren of Rachav Hazona. Tivacha, it says over here, Ben Tikva, that she was the son of Tikva. Now, if you look carefully in that pasuk, aside from Ben Charchas, it also says Ben Tikva. Uchtiv Hatam, and it says over there, Et Tikvat Chuta Shani. Over there it said the string, the rope of Chuta Shani, which is the red thread. And over there, both of those psukim are talking about a red thread. Where was the red thread by Rachav? Where she hung that red rope out the window to signal the spies that was where she lived, so that when they took over the city, that they should help her escape and not kill her. So therefore, you find Ben Tikva, you find over here this idea of Rachav with this Tikva, and therefore it indicates that Chulda was a descendant of Rachav as well. Amale ena saba. Rav Nachman said to him, ena saba. Ve'amrila patya uchma. And some say that instead he called him a very sharp language. He said patya uchma, a black kettle, right? It's a strange language, right? What does that mean? Patya uchma. We'll see exactly in just 1 second. Mini uminach tistayem shmaita. What did he say earlier? He said that they came from Rachav 8 Nevi'im. Ena Saba came along and said what? Right? He asked him from the Braita that says differently. So Rav Nachman said that Chulda was a descendant from Yoshua. He asks the question, right? You see over here that she was a descendant of Rachav. So he says, from me and from you, your Braita and what I taught together are actually teaching us what's going on here. Why? Because Rachav, she actually converted and then Yoshua married her. So what you say, that Chulda comes from Rachav from the Braita, and what I say, that Chulda comes from Yoshua, is exactly the same thing. Okay? The Gemara then continues. Umi havalu, and this is where the question I mentioned earlier comes up. Mi havalu zera li Yerushua. Did Yoshua actually have children? V'aktiv, it says, non beno Yoshua beno. Right? When we talk about Ephraim, we talk about the line of Ephraim, and we go down to Nun, and then we go down from Nun to Yehoshua, and it doesn't tell us anything more after Yehoshua, indicating that there's no more. The Gemara answers, Banila havelahu. He didn't have any sons. Bantan havelahu. He had daughters. And when we're listing over there the lineage, we're always listing the lineage of the sons, and therefore that's why it doesn't carry on by telling us anyone else that he came from. But it does tell us in the Gemara over here that from their daughters they were zochet to have those 8 prophets that were Kohanim, and as well the prophetess called Chulda. Now, one of the things I often think about when I read this Gemara is, when there's like in a movie or in a book, there's like what do they call it, foreshadowing?
Yeah.
Where something is going to happen. Like imagine in the movie, like a guy comes, or in the book, and he's like, hold on to this. You're going to need it later. And then later on, you're like, oh my God. So sometimes you could see something coming. Says the Gemara, Chulda comes from Yoshua. Says the Braita, there are 8 prophets that are Kohanim that come from, that come from Rachav, right? That's what it says, correct? 8 prophets that come from Rachav.
Yeah.
Answers Rav Nachman, it comes from Rachav and Yoshua. Gemara says, how could that be? Doesn't mean he must have. I thought he didn't have sons. It's the Gemara came from the daughters.
They married Kohanim.
Obviously, Yoshua is from the tribe of Ephraim. How could the children from that marriage produce Kohanim unless it was daughters that married Kohanim? I kind of feel like when it said that there were 8 prophets that were Kohanim, we kind of realized that this was going to go through the lineage of the daughters and not through the lineage of the sons. All right? Let's move on. The Gemara now said we had 8 different people that were Kohanim. Okay? And we listed all of them. Who are they? Yirmiyah, Hanamel, Baruch, and Seraya. Okay? So 4 of those, as the Gemara says, were the sons of the other 4, of Chilkiah, Shalom, Neriah, and Machseh. As we said earlier, I mentioned Neriah. Baruch was the son of Neriah. How do we know Baruch was the son of Neriah? Because there's a famous story with him, with Yirmiyah, that when Yirmiyah told them of the destruction of Eretz Israel, what did he do immediately upon telling them what was happening? He said, you're going to be exiled. And then he went and he told Baruch ben Neriah, he said, go out and buy a piece of property in Yerushalayim.
Zoom didn't end, right?
No. Why did it say buy? Why did he tell him to buy a piece of property in Yerushalayim? So that the Jews who were going into exile would know that they were coming back. So they would have hope when they went into exile that they were going to come back. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. Now let me add one more piece to this because I think it's very important. We actually had that in this week's parasha. The Jewish people are told you're not getting into Eretz Israel. That's it. You lost your chance. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor. And God says to Moshe, go tell the Jews, Ki tavo el haaretz, when they come, this is going to be the halachot of the korban. Why did Hashem do that? The answer is, because the people were giving up hope. You know what? We didn't get in because we made a mistake. 40 years from now, our children are going to make another mistake. We're never going to get in. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reassured them, Ki tavo el haaretz. So that's where we know Baruch ben Neriah from that story. The Gemara says, but so how do we know that all of these people, where do we know them? The Gemara answers, Bishlema inu, when it comes to Yirmiyah, Hanamel, Baruch, and Seraya, each one of those, the Pasuk specifically describes the Nevi'im as being Nevi'im. Ela av hatayu minalan, how do we know that their fathers were also prophets? What's the proof that the 4 other ones, Chilkiah, Shalom, Neriah, and Machsaya, were all prophets? The Gemara says, we learned this from Ula. We already had this before. Te'amar Ula, kol makom sheshmo v'shem aviv b'neviut. Every time when a prophet is named with his father, biyadua shu navi ben navi, shmo v'lo shem aviv, when it says his name and not the name of his father, biyadua shu navi v'lo ben navi, then you know that he's a navi himself, but he's not the father. His father is not a navi, because when the father is a navi, you're indicating that this is a tradition that exists in the family. When you list the person without naming his father, you're saying that this nivuah came in isolation. It didn't come, it wasn't given, handed down, or taught by his father. The Gemara continues and says, Shmo v'shem iro beforash biyadua shu me'ota ir. Shmo ve'lo shem iro biyadua shu miYerushalayim. When it says Shmuel was from Ramata, you know Shmuel comes from that city, because it had to tell you that that's where he came from. If it just tells you the name of a prophet, it doesn't tell you where he's from, automatically you know that he's from Yerushalayim. I think that's something very powerful over here. What we're communicating is that when someone comes from another city other than Jerusalem, it was considered to be a bigger deal that he became a prophet. He was distanced from the Kedusha. It was somewhere else instead. So therefore, if it had to mention where he came from, we need to tell you he's not from Yerushalayim, this person. He came from another place. He was still able to climb and to become a Navi. Everyone else, if it doesn't say it, you automatically know it's from Yerushalayim, because where else would a Navi come from? Let's continue with the last piece over here. Gemara says, B'matnit Tana, we learned in the Braita. Kol shema'asav u'ma'aseh avutav stumin, when it does not tell you the person's actions and the father's actions. Ufarat lach hakatuv be'echad me'en l'shvach. And then the Torah tells you about one of the father or the son, and it mentions that this one was good. Kigon divar Hashem asher haya el Tzefanya ben Kushi ben Gedalia. When it says the word of God was to Tzefanya, the son of Kushi, the son of Gedalia, biyadua shu tzadik ben tzadik. You know that this guy is Tzaddik ben Tzaddik. And when the Pasuk tells you about one of them in a negative sense, and it relieves the other people out, Kegon vayhi b'chodesh ha-shevi'i, ba Yishmael ben Netanya ben Elishama, Yishmael the son of Netanya, the son of Elishama came, biyadua shu rasha ben rasha. You know that he's a wicked person, and also his father's a wicked person. Why? Because if the person was a rasha, the son of a tzaddik, and the Torah was not going to bother to tell you that the father was a tzaddik, you would unjustly assume that the father was also a rasha. Because look, the kid is following in the ways and the footsteps of his father. This is how he was raised. So you would automatically assume this is the kind of family he came from. So therefore, in order to protect the tzaddik, the pasuk would have listed that the tzaddik was different. So if you have a person who came from such a situation, then, and it's not expressed, then you would know that it's either a tzaddik ben tzaddik or rasha ben rasha. Can I ask though, what's the proof that if the person's a tzaddik, the son of a rasha, that it would be poret, that it would mention that the father's actions were wicked? What's the proof? When the father's a tzaddik and the son's a rasha, how could we let you think badly about that tzaddik? So the pasuk would either tell you that his actions were good, but it would not let you assume bad about the person. But in the reverse scenario, let's say there's a tzaddik ben rasha. Why do we care about the fact that the father's a rasha? I don't care what you think about him. I'm talking about the tzaddik over here. Why do you know that it's a tzaddik ben tzaddik? The answer is actually, I think, very powerful for two reasons. Number one, why would I be mentioning the father if the father had no relationship with the child? And I'm only talking about the child. And we never ever mention anything about the father. So number one, it must be that we're saying Zecher Tzaddik, the mentioning of Tzaddik l'Rasha, because when it comes to Shem Risha'im Yirkav, we rather that the name of Risha'im rot, okay? But the second answer I think is more powerful. The second answer, Jonah, we need to unmute, all right? The second answer is that that it's also for the sake of the tzaddik. Why? Because when Rivka is a tzaddiket, and her father's Lavan and her father and her brother Lavan and Betuel, respectively, that gives you that much more kavod, and you learn that many more lessons from Rivka. So for the sake of the tzaddik that had to work double hard to get out from the Rasha ghetto, that is something that's worth mentioning. So therefore, we would have had to mention it. It can't be that person is not tzaddik ben tzaddik. Okay, we're going to continue from here, Be'ezat Hashem, next week. Baruch Hanei Le'olam.